Well, howdy, everybody. It's Brian. I want to give you a heads up. We're going to begin things a little differently today and continuing our series of interviews with the great Lloyd Wells. We're going to start off by playing one of his recordings in its entirety from his CD Invitation. And this would be one of his solo guitar recordings and arrangements. It's the Victor Young medley. And it's going to be especially relevant today and set up a nice context because we're going to be talking about the guitar. So, Lloyd, take it away. And that was the great Lloyd Wells playing solo guitar from his CD Invitation, and that was the Victor Young medley. The selections that you may have been able to pick out in that medley were When I Fall in Love, Street of Dreams, My Foolish Heart, and Stella by Starlight. I think as a professional musician and guitarist myself for many years, I have the greatest appreciation for Lloyd's arrangements in these songs and in these recordings. They're intricate, they're gorgeous, and how he's able to create these and translate it and implement those complex. And when I say complex, it doesn't sound like that as it's being played. Lloyd makes it sound simple. But these arrangements are complex, and there's many nuances in there that I hope you guys picked up on as Lloyd worked his way through that Victor Young medley. All right, so let's get into the interview with Mr. Wells. So Lloyd, for years you've always told me that you practice guitar every day, once or twice a day even. So did you practice guitar today?
I did that. No, I didn't, because I had, like I told you, I had to come meet Brian Hilligoss over. And we were going to get into this, but I did want to talk about the guitar just a little bit in terms of having done it, having played the thing for so long, and in terms of being serious about playing the guitar, about playing music on the guitar. And I don't want it to sound like preaching, but I'd play in the morning because whatever creative juices I have seem to flow in the morning, and they certainly don't at night. And I do play at night, but I'm just like a zombie. I just do that to keep my fingers going. But in the morning, I feel like something moves, whatever. And it is such a I feel like a guitar player has got to get to the point of loving what the guitar sounds like. And I'm speaking of, I play an arch-top guitar with a pickup, with a Charlie Christian pickup on it, through an amp in the morning. Very quiet, just a little amp, just enough to boost the bass strings just a little bit. I love that sound of the guitar. I tire of acoustic guitar after a while. After I hear it for a while, it starts to get brittle to me. Mm-hmm. But the arch top through an amp a little bit is one of the prettiest sounds that I know of. And I think it may turn out to be it's not the perfect instrument. They tell you the only perfect instrument are all the fretless strings, the trombone, and the slide whistle. Everything else is fretted, or it's got keys or whatever.
And that makes those instruments imperfect?
Yeah, because you can't move the leading tone up a little bit, get it a little sharper, which it happens in certain keys, that type thing. Anyway, I think the reason I feel that way about the guitar is that, as opposed to the piano, which is almost a perfect instrument, and is perfect in the concept that you can include all the harmonies and melodies that you can't quite do on other instruments. You can almost do it on the guitar. But the guitar has that perk that it can produce tone variations, tonal qualities that you cannot get out of the piano. If you play a top ledger line F on the piano 5 times in a row, you can play it, or I can play it, and the greatest piano player in the world can play it, and it's going to sound exactly the same way. But if you give a man a guitar who's never played a guitar and say, play me 5 Fs in a row, he's got to think of holding the string down on the correct fret, holding the pick, hitting the string, where on the string he hits it. It's just an amount of variables that just keep going, and all that affect the tone that you can't get from that piano. You know what I'm saying?
Even how you hold your mouth.
Exactly.
Even how your heart's beating that day.
Which way you face it. I just thought I'd throw that in. you know.
Now, how did it happen that you started playing 7-string guitar? And I want to clarify, you have a low A string, right? You've added a string on the top.
It's an A. It's an A down below the low E on there.
Yeah, yeah.
I met a guitar player in New York and worked with him, became buddies with him. Ralph Pat was his name. And he was playing 7-string guitar, but he didn't tune it like 7-stringers usually do. He tuned it in an augmented chord all the way across. It was the same written range as a regular guitar, a low E on the bottom, a high E on the top. But if you strummed the open strings of the guitar, it sounded like an E augmented chord. E, G sharp, B sharp, E, G sharp, B sharp, E. And it got me interested in just the 7-string thing. And I'd always been a fan of George Van Epps. I had not seen him, but I'd heard his stuff and knew I couldn't play like him. I went out to a guy named Ray Matty out in Long Island somewhere, and I had an L5, pre-war L5, and I took it out there and asked him if he would fix the neck of that so it would take care of a 7-string, put a peg up there for it, and he did. He put extra wide tape on each side of it and laid the frets out over the tape, and then he begrudgingly bored a hole in the peg box of that pre-war L5 and put a banjo peg up there. And that's I played that for years in the pits, man. And then finally, Van Epps himself came to New York and did a 1 day of concerts in the Taft Hotel, if I remember correctly.
Oh my God!
And he would do 20 minutes on, and then he'd do 20 minutes of signing autographs or just talking. Then 20 minutes, and it was in a little concert hall, small thing. And every major guitar player that I knew of at the time went to see him. And everybody swore that they would go by. He was pushing the George Van Epps model Gretsch guitar.
Nice.
You know, so everybody went and bought one except me. I already had one that had a 7th peg, and later on I bought a Gretsch thing. But my basic belief about it is that guitar players have been shortchanged all these years, and with just 6 strings. The guitar deserves the 7-string. It enables you to put a bass note in the right register. You know, considering that in the key of D, the lowest note you got, unless you drop the D, is a D somewhere up in, an octave above where it ought to be. And it took quite a change. It took it was a hard thing to get into, and I just let it develop as it was. I made no great study out of it. But I really, honest to God, think that's the way the guitar should be. If I ever started anyone out to play the guitar, I would give them 7 strings. There's no question.
Well, as long as I've known you, I've never seen you with a 6-string guitar in your hand.
I have one.
Oh, so you got...
I got 2. I got 2 at the house. Yeah.
Give me a rundown of what you have.
I got a Gibson Super 400, Gibson L5, an Epiphone. I forgot what the model is. That's a 6-string. I got a little Gibson parlor guitar, a L4 or something, an old thing, like 1920s or something. It's 6 strings. But I have
You got a gut string too.
Got
right?
a gut string 6-string and a gut string 7-string. And I have another arch top. It's Welker is a male. Fred Welker made it here in Nashville. I bought it from Mill Deal, and it has 7 strings. But I know for me to pick up 6 strings now, it's might as well be written in Cyrillic or something. I don't understand.
Now let me ask you something. Is it difficult for a bass player to navigate what you're going to play on the lower strings? Or,
it's difficult for me to navigate around bass players. You can cause a war down there, you know. So if you're playing with a bass player, you play differently. There's no question about it. You know, you essentially do away with the bass string. You know, you play 6-string guitar, chord voicings and all, you know.
Wow, it seems like a lot. You have to be thinking a lot.
It's a pain to have to think anytime, you know. I don't want to think. I'd rather just play. And to have to think is kind of hard.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Speaking of thinking and playing, in my more recent years, I have been exposing myself to more music and more jazz, and really have grown an appreciation for it in a way that I never had before. And it's been actually kind of exciting to do that for me. I never thought I would actually get there. I think I just want to listen to, Porter Wagner sing Highway Headed South or something. But let me ask you, speaking of thinking, it seems like you have to think a lot in jazz anyway. And I had asked you one time, actually you were talking to me and telling me that in all of music, that virtuosos, people who can think a lot and play a lot, virtuosos are fewer and far between than people really realize. And you mentioned to me that a true virtuoso example for you was Toots Thielemans. Is that still true? What do you think about that? And maybe I should add that Toots, for all you folks who don't know, he was a chromatic harmonica player and played on everything known to man for many, many years, recordings and TV shows and TV themes and lots of Sesame Street, I think. And I think him and maybe Stevie Wonder are the greatest ever at the chromatic harp. But he was also a jazz guitarist and, as you would say, a virtuoso. Tell me more about that.
If you lock it into the jazz genre, I think, well, I'll say this, Toots was a hell of a good guitar player, too.
Yeah. But he couldn't do what he did on the harp.
No. And I think if he had been able to do what he did on the harmonica, on the guitar, he would have been the greatest jazz guitar player to ever walk the earth. And he's got to be one of the 4 or 5 greatest jazz musicians. You listen to him, and there wasn't anything that he couldn't do with it. Didn't matter. He played what he heard. Now you got to back up and say, my God, what was he hearing?
Right. And do you think that part of the reason why he wasn't able to be the greatest jazz guitar player of all time is because maybe he didn't know the fretboard as well as he knew the harmonica? Or,
you're probably right. But maybe backwards. He may have known the harmonica so well, so much better than he did. It wasn't a lack of guitar. It was just an overabundance of harmonica. I don't know when he started playing harmonica. Must have been 2 and a half or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what he'd have done on other instruments. I don't know how he would have. It's just a freakish thing.
Hey, let's play a little bit of Toots Thielemans playing one of my favorites, my very favorites, Hoagy Carmichael's Stardust. And as soon as listeners start hearing this, I'm sure you'll make the connection and go, oh, that guy. Wow, hearing that it brings back my whole childhood watching television. I think he was on everything back then. Real quick, I want to also play some of Toots playing guitar and whistling. I saw him whistle one time, I believe, on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Amazing jazz whistler, and that sort of inspired me. I used to think I was quite the whistler. But anyway, here is Toots playing some guitar and whistling for us. And that was the great Toots Thielemans. Lloyd, let me ask you something. If you could have dinner with any two people, who would that be? Would Mundell Lowe be on that list?
Monday would be one. Because he was like a walking library. And he was always willing to share it with you. Any part of that library. You know that phrase about when a man dies, it's like burning a library. Mm-hmm. That's where it comes from. That man is one of the reasons that saying is viable. You know, I can't quite zero in on anybody else. It would if you could get Ernie Ford at the right time, mm-hmm. when he's had a meal, and he's not open to all the stimuli that's around him and all that, because he was he had that propensity that some guys have, that you can sit down and read the directory, mm-hmm. the phone directory to you, and it sounds interesting. That's the kind of thing he was.
Yeah.
Now there's some intellectual guys that I would too, but I might get at odds with them before.
And then there's people from Mississippi. I know you used to talk about your mother a lot.
Oh my God, yeah, my daddy was too. I didn't have him till I was 18. You know, that's when he lived, and I've even forgotten about what he sounded like at the time. I just know that everything he ever did pertaining to me was for my good. That I trusted him to the nth degree, and I hope that's the way my children look at me. I think that's the way that my son's daughter, my granddaughter Ella, is looking at him. You know.
Wow, Lloyd, you are a kind and thoughtful man, and creative as well. And speaking of Ella, one of the surprises that we have, if folks will click on the link in the description or the comments, they'll be taken to a place where they can listen to more of your music, including the CD that's never been released, Lullabies for Ella. And I want to close with one of my favorites from that CD right now, which is I See the Moon. So we'll play that now for Ella and for any of you folks who are listening that still feel like a child inside. I See the Moon, written by Meredith Willson in 1953. And this is Lloyd Wells.